In this tutorial, you will learn how to make a repeating donut pattern like this one here. It's perfect for learning some of the basic Illustrator processes, and it's pretty simple and fun to do. So we're going to start by going File and New and create a square canvas. So I've just typed in 200 by 200 millimeters for the width and height and clicked on Create. Now I'll just copy my donuts over. You're going to start out by going Window and Workspace, and even if you've got Essentials Classic ticked, we want it on Essentials Classic, just go Reset Essentials Classic just to make sure that your workspace looks like mine. Okay, we're going to start out by making the basic donut shape, so you can see that 5 out of the 6 donuts are using the same basic shape, and it's just all pretty much a variation on a theme. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the ellipse tool. It's in your side toolbar. If you click and hold down, you might have the rectangle tool on top as the default, but if you click and hold that down, you'll get all these options. You can also hit L on your keyboard to easily bring up the ellipse tool. It's a very good idea to just memorize some of the basic keyboard commands so that your tools are easier to access. So click on the ellipse tool. Now if I click and drag out a shape, it will be irregular, but if I hold down Shift as I'm clicking and dragging out a shape, it will be a perfect version of that shape. So in this case, a perfect circle. With the rectangle tool, if you hold down Shift, you'll get a perfect square. So we're going to do that. We're also going to hold down Alt, because then our object will be dragged out from the center of the cursor. So I'm going to click and drag out my shape. I'm going to click on where it says stroke and click on none, and double click on the fill. And if you click on like the oranges down here, you'll be able to get a nice browny color. All right, so to make the shadow around the edge there, I'm going to drag out a copy of that shape. So to do that, I'm going to make sure the shape is selected. So I'm just automatically hitting V on my keyboard to go back to my selection tool. So that's one that needs to be memorized. Just hit V if you're done using another tool. And that way you'll be able to click and drag your objects around. So I'm holding down Alt. Alt is what you hold down when you want to drag out a copy of something. So if I click and drag this out, I can drag out another copy. I'm going to go Control Z to undo that. So Alt or Option if you're working on a Mac. I'm going to hold down Shift as well to make sure that they stay in line with one another. So holding down Alt and Shift, I'm just dragging out a copy just slightly. Just about that much so that they're overlapping. Now I'm going to select both of these shapes. You can do that by holding down Shift and clicking on both shapes, or you can click and drag a marquee around the two. And then I'm going to my Shape Builder tool, so I can go Shift M on my keyboard to bring that up as well, and then clicking in that outside bit. So this part now is a shape of its own. Now hit V on your keyboard to go back to your selection tool. Deselect everything, click on the circle that's furthest over to the left and hit delete on your keyboard. So now I've got the donut shape and the shadow shape, which I can color separately. So if I click on the shadow shape and double click on my fill, I can select a slightly different tone of brown. And then we're just going to select both of those and go Control G to group them together. Now I'm going to go back to my ellipse tool and hover it until it says center. I've got lots of things on the board, so it's a little bit trickier. That's all right, we can fix that up afterwards. There we are. Now I'm going to hold down Alt and Shift on my keyboard and drag out the donut hole shape from the center. So again, I'm going to make that shadow shape. So to do that, I'm going to hold down my Alt key and my Shift key and click and drag a copy of that hole shape over to the right, to the left, sorry. And then select both of those shapes by holding down Shift, and then go Shift M or get my shape builder tool and click in that shadow bit. And I'm going to deselect everything, go back to my selection tool, click on the one that's closest over to the left and delete. Now I want this shape here to form a hole. So to do that, I'm going to select everything, go back to my shape builder and click on that. And now deselect, select the hole and hit delete. So now you'll see if I select everything, there's a hole in the middle of my donut. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just group that basic shape together. So I'm going to go Control G to group. You can also go Object and Group to group. And then I'm going to drag out some copies of it. So hold down my Alt key and drag out 5 copies. Now the first thing we're going to do is make the donut with the icing on it. So to do that, I'm going to get my ellipse tool again and drag out a circle. Now to make it have that wavy edge, I'm going to go Window, Effect, Distort and Transform, and Zigzag, and select Preview and click on Smooth. So I'm going to reduce the size down to maybe 0.5 or 0.7 and reduce the ridges per segment to about 3. And you can see what you're doing if you check the preview box. And then I'm going to click OK. And now you can see the outline of the circle, so it hasn't changed that into a shape of its own yet. So to do that, we're going to go Object and Expand Appearance. So this can be our chocolate donut. We're going to click on that and hold down Shift and click on the main donut shape, and then go Shift M to bring up the shape builder tool. Click on the middle part and now select the hole and just delete it off. We also need to do that with the shadow. So now we can make our icing. So the shadow color is going to be a little bit darker than the icing itself. And you can even hold down Alt and drag out a copy of the icing. We need that on 4 of our donuts. go over to this one. So on this one, I'm going to be making some sprinkles. So to do that, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hold down my shape tool and get my rounded rectangle tool and drag out 4 rounded rectangles. And I'm going to make them all different colours, different pastel colours. You can make them whatever colours you like. So I'm going to go, I've just dragged out a copy, I'm going to go Control D twice to repeat that action. So that's a little shortcut. So in order to make these sprinkles, rather than just copying them painstakingly onto the donut, what we're going to do is turn them into a brush. Okay, so to do that, we go to Window and Brushes, and you're going to click and drag your shape into the brushes panel. So when you're hovering the cursor over into the brushes panel, it will have that plus icon on it. So drop it in, select Scatter Brush from the pop-up menu, click OK. Where it says Rotation, select Random and just drag it all the way to the left and then all the way to the right and click OK. Now we're going to deselect everything. In fact, before we do that, we're going to just quickly do that with every sprinkle. Okay, so now we've made a brush. We're going to go to our paintbrush tool. Just make sure that everything's been deselected and that your stroke and fill is swapped around. So you click on that little arrow there. So you should have no fill and just a stroke outline. Then go to your paintbrush and select the first sprinkle. And then you can just click, 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 and all the sprinkles will come out. And they'll all be randomly rotated. So it's just a lot easier than copying and pasting them on. So go through and do that with each of the colors. Make sure they're balanced evenly. So when you have finished making all the sprinkles, what we're going to do is expand all of the sprinkles so that they're individual shapes of their own. And make that a little bit lighter. Okay, so just with your selection tool, click and drag out. So everything is selected and go to Object, Expand Appearance. object, expand. And now you'll see if I zoom in that these have all their own stroke outline, and that means that I can resize it and the strokes won't go all blobby and out of shape. Then I'm going to go Control G or Object and Group to group that one together because that one's completed. Okay, so for the next one then, I'm going to do a clipping mask one. So what you can do is go on the internet and just save a watercolor texture image. Then once you've done that, go File and Place. And just click and your watercolor will come up here. So I'm gonna hover it over my donut and then go Object, Arrange, Center Back, or you can go Shift Control and left square bracket to do that. So with the watercolor selected and the icing selected, so holding down Shift to select both the icing and the watercolor, you go Control 7 or your keyboard. You can also go Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And then that watercolor texture goes inside the donut. Oops. Now I didn't make those shadows a shape of their own, but that's easy fix. I'll just get my shape builder tool and click there and make that a different shade of pink. Oh, it's grouped, isn't it? So I've just ungrouped that. So I've gone Object and Ungroup, and now I'll be able to color that one without coloring everything. Okay, so now we're going to make some shiny bits. So to do that, I'm just going to use my paintbrush tool here. So select in your brushes panel. If you don't have that up, go Window and Brushes to bring it up. You should have as a default your 5-point round brush. So I'm going to select that. Make sure that you don't have a fill, just a stroke outline, and reduce your stroke weight to around 0.5. Reduce the opacity to about 20% and make the stroke color a lighter color of the watercolor. Double click on your paintbrush before you start and make sure this slider is dragged all the way to smooth. And then I'm just gonna run along. That's actually a little bit too light. But I'm just accenting some of these icing parts. And you can use your Surface pen or your Apple pen if you want to do a more accurate job. Oops. There we go. All right, so that's number 2. Now, number 3 is going to be our cinnamon donut. So go over to the one that doesn't have icing on it. We're going to go back to our ellipse tool and click and drag out a tiny circle. And just eyedropper it so it's the color of the shadow. So it should be about that big. relative to your donut. Drag out a copy of it, so hold Alt on your keyboard and drag out a copy and make that roughly 50% of the opacity of the other one. Now we're going to go to Window, and if you go right down to the bottom of your window menu, click on Symbols. And we're going to click and drag symbol 1 in. I'm going to call it Cinnamon 1. And this one can be Cinnamon 2. Now go to your symbol sprayer tool, which is here. And we're going to hold down the symbol sprayer tool and it will spray out some of that symbol. So this is spraying out the most recent one. And now I'll grab some of the darker one. All right, now select everything and go to Object and Expand to turn the cinnamon into shapes. Object, Expand, okay. And now go to Object and Ungroup. Now any of these guys that are overhanging we can shift back on. Okay, that one's done. You can shift them around as well if they're a little bit too close to the edges. That one's finished, so we're going to select everything and go Control G to group that one together. Okay, the next one. All right. We're going to get our ellipse tool here, oops, and click and drag out a circle that covers the middle. It doesn't matter if it's not lined up, as long as there's no gaps. We're going to hold down Shift, select that circle and the icing, and in your Pathfinder window, so go to Window and Pathfinder to bring that up, click on Unite, and now that's one big shape. And then we're going to make that, you can make it whatever color you want. In fact, we're going to give it a gradient fill. So click on where it says gradient down here, double click on the end slider. Now it automatically comes up in grayscale. So if you click on that little menu in the top right hand corner, click on CMYK. And so we're going to give that one side a light blue color and double click on the other gradient slider. Again, change the color mode to CMYK, and the other one can be a bit darker. And now we're going to select radial gradient so it comes out from the middle. Gets darker around the edges. Okay, when you're done with that, we're going to get the pen tool. Now make sure your stroke and fill is swapped around And in fact, you can eyedropper, so I'm hit I on my keyboard to bring up the eyedropper tool. It's there as well to get that chocolate colour. And now swap your stroke and your fill and get your pen tool and click on the outside, hold down your shift key to maintain a straight line and click to the other side of that icing. Now if you go to stroke, so you can go to window and stroke to bring up your stroke panel. If you don't have all of these options like I do here, you can click on the right menu option and click on show options. I'm going to make the stroke weight a little bit thicker and change the profile to width profile 1, so it's pointier at the ends. And then I'm going to go to effect up the top toolbar and zigzag, so go to distort and transform and zigzag and change that profile to smooth. I'm going to have, oops, I'm going to change the size until it's just as big as the donut is. And make okay, so I'm going to make mine like that and click OK when you're happy. Make sure that preview box is ticked so that you can see what you're doing. Your measurements are going to be slightly different depending on how big you've dragged out your circle. So I'm going to click OK and then go Object and Expand Appearance to turn that into a shape of its own, and then I'm going to rotate it. And I can just do a bit of a resize if I need it to fit on. Okay, so to rotate, I've just hovered my cursor on the corner and it just clicked and dragged it around. You can also, if you want it to be a little bit more accurate, you can go into Object, Transform and Rotate and type 45 degrees into the angle here. Okay, that's that. Okay, the last one is the bite. Oh, and then we've got some churros to do as well. Okay, so make your icing a different color here. I'm going to select everything again and just make sure that this shadow is a shape. So I'm going Shift and M to bring up my shape tool, clicking in that bit there, deselecting everything, then clicking on the shadow and making that a slightly darker color. Okay, now I'm going to hold down my shape tool and get my polygon tool out and go click. And select, I've just clicked on the center of my canvas. This pop-up box will come up and I've typed 6 sides in here. Now I'm going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, Pucker and Bloat, and I'm going to drag out my bloat to 30, roughly 35 to 40%, and click OK. Then go Object, Expand Appearance. Now with my selection tool, I'm just going to resize this now, holding my Shift key to constrain the proportions of it. So I've resized it and positioned it to create this bite mark. So it kind of looks good if that flower shape is sitting in the center. It's lined up with the edge there. Okay, so now I'm going to select that flower shape, hold shift, select the main donut and the icing, go to my shape builder tool, here it is, shift M, and click on these parts here to turn them into individual shapes, and now I'm going to delete them off, and that's going to leave a bite mark like that. So for these sprinkles, we're just going to do what we did with the other sprinkles. If you wanted to, you can use the existing sprinkle shape. I've done some round ones here, so all you'd have to do here is click and drag a round circle out and put that into your brushes panel and turn that into a scatter brush. I'm just gonna very quickly use my existing one, so getting my paintbrush tool, making sure I've got just a stroke outline and no fill. I'm gonna grab some of my existing sprinkles. I would encourage you to make them a little bit different and make a round brush for the sprinkles on this donut. Okay. And again, I'm going to select it all, go to Object, Expand Appearance, and go Control G to group all of those together. Now these ones I didn't expand those, so it's important that you expand all of your brush strokes and turn those into shapes. And I'm going to group that one together as well, Control G to group. Okay, so for the last one, we're going to make these churros. So I'm going to hold down my shape tool and get a rounded rectangle. I'm going to click and drag out a rounded rectangle. Oops. And go to my eyedropper tool. So I've hit I on my keyboard and eyedroppering that donut color. I'm going to go back to my rounded rectangle tool shape and drag out a thinner rounded rectangle and eyedropper the shadow shape. Hold down my Alt key, click and drag out a copy. Select both of the shadows and go Control G to group. Now select the main part. And in my Align panel, so go to Window, Align, and make sure Align to Selection is selected. So we're going to go Horizontal Align Center so that these two are in the middle of the main one. And then I'm going to go Shift Control G or Object Ungroup to ungroup those. Select everything, go to your shape builder tool, Shift M, click in that overlapping parts and and now just delete those overlapping parts off. So we're going to go and select your main churros shape and go Control C on your keyboard and then Control F to paste that shape in front. Now I'm going to go Shift Control and right square bracket to bring it to the front of my layers. So you can also go Object if you miss that keyboard command, Object Arrange and bring to front. So Shift Control right square bracket. We're going to Eyedropper the chocolate color. And now go to your pencil tool, double click on your pencil tool and make sure fidelity is dragged all the way up to smooth. And now we're going to change that path to make it look like dripping chocolate. So to do that, we're going to start by drawing along the path, draw our dripping chocolate shapes and finish it off by drawing along the path. And you can adjust those shapes as well just by drawing along the path and then finishing along the path. Just to adjust it. Okay. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key and drag out 3 copies. So I've dragged out one, I've gone Control D to repeat that action. I'm going to delete the chocolate sauce off one and then adjust the chocolate sauce on this one just to make it look a little bit different. So again, go back to your pencil tool. And start, oh that one's a little bit rubbish. Start along the path. And finish along the path. Oops. And when you're happy with that, what we're going to do is use our pencil tool to make some highlights. So go to your pencil tool, or swap the stroke and the fill around this time. Double click on the stroke and select a light brown color. We're going to go to Window and Stroke. Go to Profile and select Width Profile 1. And then with your pencil tool, you're going to draw along the outline like that. Oops. And reduce the opacity of the stroke to roughly 50%, just to add on a couple of highlights. I'm just using my mouse. It's so much easier to use a pen, so if you've got one, make sure you do that. Okay. So that's that. We're going to expand those strokes. So go to expand appearance and group those ones together as well. Now it's time to make our pattern. So anything that isn't your donuts, just delete those off. And we're going to open up the Align panel, resize your churros so they're roughly the same size of your donuts, but your donuts should all be the same as each other. Okay, so go to Window and bring up your Align panel and make sure you've got Align to Selection. We're going to select all three in the top row and click on Vertical Align Center, and all three in the bottom row and click on Vertical Align Center. Now we're going to select these two. They should all be grouped as well, and go Horizontal Align Center. Oops. Select these ones and go Horizontal Align Center, and these ones and Horizontal Align Center. So these two, they should all be lined up with one another. Now we're going to select these first two and go Control G to group. The second group we're going to go Control G to group, and the third group we're going to go Control G to group. And then we're going to select all of them and make sure they're evenly spaced. So click on Horizontal Distribute Center, and then the spacing between each of those three groups should be even. Okay, now we're going to turn it into a pattern. So select everything and go to Object, Pattern, and Make. Okay, so if you've put a watercolor into a clipping mask, we're going to need to embed that first. So go to Window and Links, and then in the top corner with that watercolor selected, click on the menu and go Embed Images. Now we can go back to Object, Pattern, Make. Okay, so in your tile type, you can select different ways of arranging it. You can brick it by row, you can brick by column. You can also grab your pattern tile tool and either bring this in or out a little bit just to make sure the spacing is even in between your donuts. But once you've chosen the tile type that you like, you're going to click on and arrange that so you're happy with the spacing between your donuts. You click Save a Copy and click OK, and that's been put into your swatches panel. Then click Done. So we're going to shift these off the canvas and get our rectangle tool and drag out a rectangle the size of the canvas. And this is going to be for your background color, so you can make it whatever color you like. And now go Control C and Control F to put a copy of that rectangle on the top. And then go to your swatches panel and click on the donuts. And that pattern will appear on your page. If you want the pattern to be slightly smaller, go to your scale tool, hold down Alt on your keyboard and click on the canvas. We're going to uncheck transform objects and just click on transform patterns because we want the pattern scale to change. I'm going to try 60%. of the original size, so it's slightly smaller. There we go. My donut pattern is ready. And then you can go File, Export, Export As, select Use Artboard, call it whatever you like, click on Export as a PNG and make sure your resolution is on high, 300 ppi, and click OK. And you can upload your donut pattern to Nexus.